Shwmai a croeso cynnes, and welcome to the What's Your Story podcast. I'm James Owen, a Welsh filmmaker and storyteller, and I'm passionate about sharing stories. This podcast is all about business owners sharing their journey, and we'll be speaking with directors, entrepreneurs and creatives from all across Wales to learn from their experiences. We believe everyone has a story to tell. What's your story? Bore da, prynhawn da, welcome to this next instalment of the What's Your Story podcast. You could be listening to this in the night, you could be listening in the morning. We've got a really exciting story to talk about today, and we've got a professional property investor who's come all the way from South Africa. No, it's okay, he lives in Buryport, but he's come all the way from Buryport to talk to us in the studio here today. It is Mr. Peri Sophos. Peri, good to have you come on the What's Your Story podcast.
Thank you, James. Thank you for having me.
That's okay. You were one of many people in the back of my mind of people I'd love to hear the whole story. I've heard it many a time, but I'm sure that the audience listening would love to hear a little more. So just in summary, can you give me 2 or 3 sentences to introduce yourself and where you're currently at?
Yeah, so hello everyone who's watching this, whenever it is you're watching this. Professional property investor, as you said, that's me, and living the life of my dreams, which is a fantastic thing. But where I am right now, I've worked very hard to get there, and I have a story to tell. So let's get into it.
Good kids?
Yes, I do. I've got 2 kids. 2 kids, a beautiful wife, a beautiful family, and I'm very much so a family man. It's all about my family.
And a dog?
And a dog, beautiful little dog, a cockapoo.
A cockapoo.
Yes.
Roxy?
Roxy's
I
her
remember
name.
Roxy.
Well done, James. That's
I remember
impressive.
Roxy. So I'm sure people can tell from the accent, you're not from Llanelli or Buryport.
No.
So tell me, were you born in South Africa?
I was indeed. I was born in Johannesburg, South Africa, and lived there for a very, very good part of my life. Well, probably half, actually. I've lived now almost half in the UK, half in South Africa. So, but yeah, born and raised in South Africa.
And home to the world champions of the Rugby World Cup.
Yeah, double world champions at the moment. Let's see if we can make it a 3rd in a row.
So Johannesburg, I've never been there. I've no idea what the culture is like. Tell me a little bit about your upbringing. What was it like growing up in Johannesburg?
To be truthful, it was awesome. Grow up in a country where it's blue skies every day. You take sunshine for granted, in truth and honesty, but it's a culture of it's a beautiful environment, but in terms of business wise and growing up in that respect, it's a challenging environment. There's no like NHS system. There's no system to fall on medically, financially, or anything. So whatever you do in South Africa, you got to make your way by yourself, and if you don't, you're in trouble. So although the climate and it's got so much to South Africa, its beauty, it's vast in its beauty and what it offers, but it's a challenging environment if you get it wrong.
Wow. Okay. So you were living with your parents, I assume, at a young age, but something happened when you were about 7 years old. Tell me about that.
Yeah, unfortunately, 7 years old, I remember it vividly, waking up to the screams of my mother, shouting at my dad to not go to work. He can't go to work. And this is all I heard. And we ran, my brother and I actually came out of our bedrooms at the same time, ran up the hallway. We lived in quite a big house. Things were going well at that point. My dad, entrepreneur, he owned his own business, was doing very well. Unfortunately, he had a massive stroke at the age of 49. And he was actually with his face half hanging to one side, shaving, getting himself trying to go to work. And that, unfortunately, was the downfall to our family at that point in time. It led us to disastrous years that came from trying to survive, and we lost our home from that point onwards because he was in hospital. And when he was in hospital, he landed up in hospital in and out for about a year. He didn't have any medical insurance, and he came out of the hospital owing a substantial amount of money. But what made it even worse was just before he had his stroke, he took on 2 business partners. And he didn't sign the right contracts, and actually they signed him out the business. So when he came out of the hospital, he didn't have a business. So the 2 guys who he trusted the most actually screwed him over, which wasn't great. And it was challenging time, to say the least, in our lives. At that point in time, we lost our family home. We lost a lot, and we were struggling. But yeah, that's really what happened. And if I can fast forward to around 13, 14, I eventually got to a point that my mum and dad couldn't afford the area we were living in anymore, which was the north of Johannesburg. And they were going to move to the south of Johannesburg, a little bit cheaper area. In fact, it was probably the most rundown area in the south of Johannesburg because that's all they could afford. I refused to go. I said, no ways am I leaving. My friends, this is my life here. The story goes that my mom, because we went to church, I was brought up in church, and she knew a lady in the church, and she asked actually if I could go and live with this family. They had a big house, spare bedroom, and they said yes. So actually I ended up living and moved in with another family, which was probably, like I said, I was about 14 years of age, and I had to put myself through school. I had to work part-time in the evenings in a restaurant. And back in the day in South Africa, you had to pay for your school fees.
Really?
Yeah, you had to pay for school fees, although it wasn't a lot in the day. Well, if I think about it now, it's not a lot. But in the day, it was 700 Rand a year. I'll never forget it. And I had to go work. I had a deal with the school principal. I would pay. He was so awesome to me, in fact. He was really kind and nice. But I worked, I put myself through school, had to buy my blazer, buy my school uniform, buy my books, buy the pencils, pens, rulers, like everything you would take for granted. And I had to work for that and put myself through school, go through school. I never told anyone what was going on in my life. In fact, all my mates didn't have a clue. They said, well, why are you living there? I made up stories along the way because I was embarrassed. Actually very embarrassed what was going on in my life. I didn't want to admit that we had no money. So that was a sore point in my life. And only now 2 of my best friends really know. They knew, they found out. And today, some of the other friends of mine have found out where I am today, and they cannot believe, like, what? That was happening to you at that time. But it did happen. Should I fast forward to a little bit more?
Well, I mean, you've sort of had a tough upbringing. You haven't had a great start.
No.
And in fairness, you've had to fend for yourself at a very young age.
Yes.
And but to actually put yourself through school and pay for it yourself.
Yeah.
It makes me think taking our education system for granted in Wales. So crazy to think that's what you had to do in South Africa.
Yeah.
So you were working hard as a teenager. You got your first job, and then this started a series of another journey in your career in the sort of waiting hospitality industry.
Yeah, exactly. It's what got me into hospitality and it's what made me very good at sales because I knew, I suppose, just having that circumstance built a desire and a hunger, survival, right? So. But I wanted to excel. So whatever I did, I wanted to be the best at it because I knew being the best would get me places. It would put money on the food on the table, produce money, whatever the case may be. So I wanted to be the best waiter in the restaurant. How?
Were you the best waiter?
I'd like to say I was at the top 2, 3, 4 of the guys. There's some top guys in there. But and how do you judge? Well, it's how you gave service to the clients. So it was all service orientated, delivering the food at the right time, taking the plates away at the same time, offering top up of wine at the right time. So all these things you had to judge, but at the same time, getting your average per head, your APH, your average per head, your sales on the table, because the more you sold, potentially the bigger your tip would be at the end of the night. So I was very much so, in tuned into that, and I got very good at it. And I was making good wages that helped me pay for my school fees, And actually, my last 2 years of school, the house that I was staying in, they actually made me pay rent, which was a bit of a shock to me because I thought, hey, I'm with a nice family, it's all good. Whether he was doing it to teach me the hard ways of life or whatever the case may be, I never got a chance to really ask him. I had to pay at that point, it was 400 Rand a month or 350, and it went up to 400 Rand a month. And it was a lot of money. But to be truthful, I was making the money and I was doing it and I was having a great time in life. Loved my school, my sports, not school, but I loved my sports. So
you played some rugby when you were
played rugby. I played water polo, played tennis, first team for all, got an honours blazer. So yeah, sports was, I think, my medicine to the circumstances I found myself in. But also the school friends I had, that still close to today, the circle of friends. They were like my brotherhood. That's what got me through those times. But unfortunately, my family, the effect there was huge. My mother, unfortunately, had challenges because of circumstances. My dad, his health issues. My brother broke him down, unfortunately. But, you got to do what you got to do to survive. And I did that. I did eventually finish school. I passed. Your name was in the newspaper. I remember I actually was in the south of Johannesburg when the names came out. And for a while, we couldn't find my name. So it was a bit nerve-wracking. But eventually, we saw Peri's office. It was like, yeah, I passed.
Was that sort of how you'd find out if you passed school?
Yeah. It's like your A-levels equivalent. And what happens is your name goes in the newspaper. So they have the whole section dedicated to all those who's written their A-levels equivalent. They call it your matric in South Africa. And if your name's not there, you haven't made it. And actually, you need to repeat the whole year. And to be honest with you, I wasn't the most the best person study-wise. And that wasn't my forte, in truth and honesty. But somehow I passed school. I think someone was watching me and helping me.
I bet
a little bit of a bigger power than me,
bigger than the South African rugby team.
Bigger than the South African rugby team, way bigger.
Okay, so hospitality.
Yes,
you're progressing. You started getting good at selling. I've never thought waitressing and waitering would be sales, but yeah, it kind of is, isn't it?
Very much so.
You're trying to get that extra tip at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So you were progressing quite nicely in hospitality.
Yes.
And you ended up managing one of these restaurants.
Well, actually, what happened is very good friend of mine, Dean, he got himself into a 5-star restaurant in Sandton, in center of, in Johannesburg, very posh 5-star restaurant in a hotel, very, very posh. And you had the likes of presidents who used to come to this restaurant with their bodyguards and the Secret Service and whatever was going on, high levels. You had the Australian rugby team, cricket team, English rugby team. When the Wales used to come and play, the Welsh rugby team used to come. You used to have all the sports stars. We had movie stars that used to come to that restaurant because it was a Portuguese restaurant and it was known for its seafood and it was outstanding. And the service you got, all of it involved. The waiters, for me, eventually I got a job in there. But in order to get a job, you actually have to write a full test. Like you have to know every meal, how it's cooked, what the ingredients is. You have to know, difference between a Cabernet, a Sauvignon Blanc, full-bodied red versus a light meat, whatever the case may be. And they will test you on that. If you passed, you got the job. And then, of course, you take that knowledge onto the floor serving clients, very posh, when to take plates away, as I've said. And I got a job in there and I excelled. And my average per head sales-wise was I was smashing it. And I got good at it, but also at the same time because of my situation. Because when I left school, which was in 1993, okay, I left school, got a job pretty much so in this posh restaurant. And my goal was to get at least my mom, because my mom and dad, unfortunately, then separated through all the trauma of what happened. But I was trying to get them back to Johannesburg, to the north, and get a place. So that's what happened is I was very, the desire I had in that restaurant was huge. So because I did so well, they offered me a managerial position. I will have to admit it, I did tell a little fib because I had to be 25 years of age to get the job running their kitchen. but I knew I could do the job. And I was around 19 years of age.
How did you get away with that?
Don't tell anyone. Well, when you're good, you're good. You know, James, what can you say? I did the job. And one of the owners found out and called me aside one day. But we spoke about it. And because I was very good at what I was doing, it was all good. And he said, listen, you should have told me from the word go, because I believed in you. It was actually that owner who got me the job. He pulled me in, and he truly believed in my ability. So, but I was too scared because I needed the income, because I actually was supporting at that time my mom, my dad, and my brother on these wages. And then my brother was working, but we were, I was the main breadwinner, so to say. So, what's age when you can do something? Why be limited by your age when your ability is whatever? So, yeah, that's what happened there.
Great to see that you looked after your family, you brought them. So you moved from a poor part of Johannesburg in the south back up to the north.
I got them back.
Life is looking good.
Yeah.
And then you started managing this young woman.
Yes.
Tell me about this young woman.
Yes,
you were the boss.
This young lady then walked in, and she was actually working because there were different branches, but we were the head office, so to say, of the restaurant, the main one in Sandton. And there was another one not far, probably about 10 miles away from the main restaurant. And some Fridays and Saturdays, about 900 guests used to come through the doors. It was crazy. It was a 350-seater restaurant. You used to fill that twice, and then you had a dinner and dance. It's called a supper club, dinner and dance, part of the restaurant, but in another room where it was live bands, and you had one seating there of up to about 150 people. So some Fridays, if some staff was sick, we had to call other waiters or waitresses from the other restaurants. Lo and behold, a waitress came, and her name was Debbie. And long story short, she's now my wife. But that's where I met her. I know
she's the boss.
She's the boss, James. She's the boss, as it is. Hey, I say to her, I'm the boss. I make all the decisions. I'm the head of the family. And her response to me is, yes, you're the head of the family, but I'm the neck that turns the head.
Well, there we go. So, okay, you met Debbie, you were working together.
Yes.
And obviously, started a relationship.
We did.
And you were working all these hours, and she said, you gotta leave this industry, right?
Yeah, it got down to that, because the hours I worked, it was almost like I was in almost like in an army, of restaurants, because it was hardcore, militant, the way they ran it, the operation of it. I mean, when I worked in the kitchen, I ran all the chefs. I was the manager and ran the kitchen, all the food, the product. I ran the main sections until I eventually came onto the floor. So I went from kitchen to the floor. But I used to work probably 9:30 in the morning, arrive at work, used to finish about 2, 3 in the morning, back again. 2, 3 in the morning, back again. It was hardcore. So Debbie actually said to me, look, if you want to have a relationship with me, you can't do this industry anymore. Make a plan. And I said, well, what must I do? And she was like, find something you love, find something you're passionate about, and just go for it. I said, but I love the restaurant. It's just all I know. She said, but it can't work. So what happened is, at the same time, my brother was in the kind of like, he wasn't happy with what he was doing. I think it was just working in a retail outlet, selling shoes. Wasn't happy with that, wanted more in life. And somehow he got money, because we didn't have much money, as you can imagine. But someone gave him money, and he heard of this new thing going on in the technical world called MCSE, a Microsoft Certified Systems Engineer. And it was a whole training. And if you became qualified in that, it opened doors in the technical IT world. And he thought, I'm going to study IT. I'm going to buy it for myself. And if Peri wants to study, he can. So he bought all these books, like, one book was 1,000 pages. And there was about 7 or 8 you had to go through to qualify, to get your MCSE certification. Long story short is, I started then studying the MCSE whilst working in the restaurant full time. So in between the lunch shift and the dinner shift, as a manager, I would have to receive stock, whatever, the meats, the prawns, the fruits, the vegetables, whatever, check them. But then when there was gaps, when, I had an hour there, when it was quiet, I would go in and study. That's what I did. In work. I had to do it. Long story short, I passed all my exams and I was qualified as an MCSE certified systems engineer. And then the decision was, what now? Well, I had to leave the industry, and that's what I did. I left the industry and I got a job in one of the local banks. And I had to come from quite a decent salary that was paying for things, stepped way down to get into IT, which I did. But then I was working full-time in the bank and then working bar jobs after hours just to try and get, some more income whilst I was breaking into the IT industry. And that's what I did for a period of time. Studied more and more and more. I was very good at IT technology. In fact, I got it quite quickly. People were commenting, wow, like, who's this guy? He's pretty clever at this stuff. So I had a knack for it, which I didn't know, but I did. And I think in life I've learned, if you've got a passion for something, follow your passion, because you can turn your passion into profit. And I've been very good at that in my life. And I started learning about turning passion into profit by, making money in something that I really enjoyed. And IT was quite easy to me, but I excelled in it very, very well. So
you transitioned from hospitality into sort of banking and IT, financial services.
Yeah.
You were still living in North Johannesburg.
Yeah.
And then did Deb say, we need to leave South Africa?
That is it, James. She came home one day and dropped the bomb. Because, look, I love South Africa, and I'll say this right now. It's a beautiful country. It's got its downfalls for sure. But why we did is because crime was starting to get a bit crazy. And she was so concerned I was going to do something stupid, as in if someone tried to get clever with me, I reacted, something went wrong, and there could have been a problem. So she thought, this is not going to go well. We need to get out of this country. So she came to me one day and she said, look, I've got you an air ticket. I've paid for it. You leave in July. You actually should have spoken to my boss because I was working in a bank which is known in the UK called Investec Bank at the time. And I got given 2 weeks leave. She had arranged it all. And then came home and said, don't worry, it's all done. This is when you leave and I've paid for your ticket. I've got you staying at a friend in Wimbledon, South Wimbledon, and you're going to go stay there for 2 weeks and go and look and see and decide if you could live in the UK. So I was like, all right. Got on a plane, came. This was 2001 that I came out.
Just after you got married then?
Just after I got married. I got married in 2000. 2001 came out, 2 weeks. And of course, as I came out, there was blue skies for 2 weeks. Like there was no rain, nothing. It was in Wimbledon, it was blue skies. We had, like South Africans, we call it a braai, but we had plenty barbecues along the way. It was awesome. Guys would come home from work. The barbecue / braai was on. We were braaiing South African style, drinking beers, having fun. And I thought, this place is awesome. Everyone's been lying about the weather. This is the lie. They've been keeping this a secret their whole lives. So I thought, I'm in on this. I'm not going to tell anyone. Great. And then at the same time, I tested the market because that's why Debbie sent me out. So I actually put my CV out, got a few calls. And then one bloke said, look, I'll give you an interview. And then we did it. And he said, you got the job. Can you start on Monday? And I thought, I'll be back to you. But obviously I wasn't. And I had to let him know I can't. And then I knew, oh, wow, I can get a job. It's awesome. The sun shines. This has been a lie. It doesn't rain in London. And long story short, I went back to South Africa and we started planning to come back to the UK officially. And it was in 2003 when we actually packed up, Debbie and I together as a couple, because I was on a Greek passport at the time, because although born and raised in South Africa, my dad's Greek. So I had a passport, South African and a Greek passport, but I came into the UK on my Greek passport. Debbie's family is actually British, so she had a British passport and we came in and just started going from there, which was we were in the UK.
When you came to the UK,
Yeah.
what was it that you had altogether? Like furniture, money?
It's a good question, James. So we sold up everything and we came with a whopping £3,500 in our bank account. But because part of the ultimatum Debbie said was you need to get skilled up in your IT. Like, I got entry level stuff and then I got to a professional status. So I studied other stuff, Cisco certified network professional, MCSE, and I got all these certifications, which was quite high in the IT industry for what I was doing. And I eventually got fully qualified as a network professional, and that's when we left. So I knew I could get a good job. Well, we had $3,500 in the bank account, so the clock was ticking. I paid for 2 months of rent because I was staying with a friend, Debbie and I, and staying with him and his girlfriend. We got a place in Rains Park in London. Paid 2 months rent, had $3,500 in the bank account, and off we went from there.
So you started working for an IT company?
I did. I first got a job working for Hewlett-Packard for about a year-ish. And then I thought, this London's not a cheap place. I need a bit more money than what I'm currently getting. So I got an interview for Barclays at the time, which was called Barclays Global Investors. They've sold out. They were part of their asset management branch. And I remember going. I had about 6 interviews in one day. The final one was a video conference in San Francisco because actually BGI, Barclays Global Investors, head office was in San Francisco. And the big boss came on. And I thought, well, if I'm meeting the big boss, I've obviously done okay in these interviews. So I had that in the back of my brain. Long and story short, went home and got a call as I got back in through the agency who I got the interview through. And they said, congratulations, you got the job. I was like, cool, that's awesome. And they said to me, and you're getting a sign-on bonus. And I was like, what's that? And they said, you'll actually get paid a bonus if you sign and you start within the next month and you don't mess them around. You'll actually get a bonus. I said, well, I get a bonus to start working for them. Yes. I was like, this is amazing. This is awesome. Okay, so I did. Got a bonus, started working for Barclays Global Investors. Was all good. But then, of course, Debbie, good old Debbie. She's
listening.
She'll be listening. I know you're listening, Debbie. She was like, look, we're doing okay, but we need to do better here. I was like, well, what do you mean by that? She goes, well, we need to get uncomfortable. And, well, we need to start doing things as in finding another income stream. Because that's a South African thing. In South Africa, the way you brought up there is you don't operate on one income stream. You can have a main income stream, but then you diversify. You try and invest in something. So you try and create other income streams in case your main income stream fails, i.e. you're in a job, good job as a professional. What happens if you lost that job? What happens if you got sick? What happens if something bad happened that you couldn't work anymore? How do you get other income? So you try and create other income streams through investments in properties, trading, whatever, business, job, whatever. So she came to me and said, look, let's get involved in property because I also loved property. So my 2 passions in life is property and technology. Love it. Still to this day, I love it both. And I'll try and keep this very, very short, but Debbie's brother, middle brother in South Africa, is now living in the UK, but was a massive developer out there, building the most amazing homes that used to be on magazines, TV shows for amazing homes. You can't even conceptualize how beautiful they were, the gardening, the landscaping. And I knew he didn't have a lot of money, although he was making a lot of money eventually. But in the beginning, he didn't have a lot of money, but he was building these homes. I was like, how do you get the money to do this? How do you build a house? How do you do this? How do you do that? Long story short, while I was in South Africa, before I came to UK, he did say, come and see on my sites, come and visit my sites. So I did. I started going on weekends, and if I finish work early, I'd pop past his site, see how they're building, ask questions. How you do that? How do you do that? Where did you get the money for that? And he started installing a few seeds. in my brain on how things were happening. So when we came to the UK, technology, got the job, all good. But then when Debbie came and said, well, let's get involved in property because you like it, why don't we find out how you invest in property in the UK? I said, all right, well, that sounds good. So, of course, she found this company at the time, and we went for about a 4-hour talk, and then you sign up from there to go to a 3-day training, which I signed up for. All good to this point until they come on the Sunday and try and sell you for what they're trying to sell you. And long story short is they said, come, this is a package to do this, take your advanced training to get you on this level, how to do this, and all of this. And I was like, sounds interesting. Deb was like, okay, let's do it. But at the time, it was so much money. I think it was around, I'm not joking, this is back in 2004. It was around £16,000 to do this training. Wow. And not a chance did I have that money. Never. Even though I was actually getting paid a decent income now at Barclays, they were giving you bonuses, fine. But Debbie was like, we got to make this happen. I was like, but we can't afford this, Debbie. It's crazy. I'm not doing it. And she said, we have to do this. And I was like, well, I'm not doing it. And she said, all right, long story short, over about 3 credit cards, we did it. So here we go. I've paid for this. Now I'm like, I got to make this happen. This is like, I got to make this happen. So I went on all these trainings throughout the whole of 2004. And then in 2005, we actually landed up getting our first buy-to-let investment property. Okay, I actually then also got a house to stay in Rains Park. We did creative stuff, which I learned how to do things creatively, very creatively through property.
You're not talking about art now here.
No, creatively, finance, creative finance. And because when you got no money, you got to be creative, right? Financially. And I always, thought, yeah, you do need money to make money. But at the same time, you can be creative to find that money. So I got good at that in a sense. And whilst I was saving some money, I was getting creative. And we eventually got a buy-to-let property, our first in 2005, which was awesome. Fast forward to 2011. And
Are you still working in the bank at this time?
Still working in the bank, full-time job.
Was Debbie working?
She started off a bit rocky road because she had to find her feet. Long story short with her, got a job at Sky News as a digital video editor, which she loved, but also long hours, 12, 13 hours shifts. So we were both working full time, but I found a way how to find properties, how to get them, then eventually I would go sometimes, leave on a Saturday morning, drive all the way, because eventually after a long period of time, found out where I was going to invest, where the numbers stacked up, where things worked, where I could afford it, the numbers stacked up from a cash flow perspective. So in other words, at the end of every month, after all expenses, I had money coming in. The properties were paying me an income. And I found an area, but it was about 4 hours outside of London, in a lovely town called Grimsby, of all places. And I'm not knocking Grimsby. It's a great place. It started me off in my investment career. And I used to sometimes drive up, leave London Saturday morning, drive all the way to Grimsby, go view the properties that I'd set up viewings for, see them, put offers in, drive back. By 6, 7 o'clock, I was having dinner with mates, drinks, dinner, and I did that a lot. And I found teams, I found people on the ground. And then while I was working in Barclays, I would take my lunch hour, although no one ever did because of the culture, work. I was like, bugger that. If they don't care about me, they want me for my skills, great, I'll give them my skills, 110% of my skills, but I will take, when I want a lunch, I'll take a lunch. I did. And in that lunch hour, I was looking for properties. I was making calls. I was following up. I was starting to create the business. And in 2011, we actually, through buying properties, I became financially free through property. Not meaning I'm like a multimillionaire, but what it meant was that actually I had enough income coming through property to replace my salary at Barclays. So then Debbie and I decided, all right, well, look, why don't you go get out the rat race? don't quit IT because I still loved it, but go instead of having a full-time job, go and basically contract as in when you need the money. So that's what I started to do. So I handed in my resignation, went to the day, handed in, and my manager at the time said, Peri, whoever's paying you whatever, we'll match it. Just show me what they've offered you. I promise you we'll match it or I'll better it. I was like, oh, so why are you telling me this now? And he was like, no, I mean it. Like, seriously, tell me what you've done. I said, actually, in truth, I'm leaving the industry, as in I'm going to go contracting. So can you offer me a contract job? There's nothing contracting now. I said, well, I want a contract. But I'm leaving the industry for a while because I've actually been buying properties and I've got enough income. He was blown away. He was like, how the heck did you do that whilst working here? And I said, well, if you want to find out one day, you can pay me money and I'll teach you. Long story short. But 1 month after that, I quit and left Barclays. And I left. It was 2011. We actually left. We went to South Africa to a wedding. It was one of my nieces was getting married. And during that holiday, I started having weird feelings down my left side of my leg. Weird. When I say weird is it's like 1 minute I had power in my leg, like I could walk and have power. And the next minute the power was being sucked out of my leg, just this left leg of mine. And it was very weird and it was happening and I didn't want to tell anyone. But it's happened once, then it happened twice, it happened 3 times. And I remember actually at my niece's wedding, I had like 2-3 beers, not a lot, 2-3 beers, little bottles. And I'd like to think myself as a good dancer. But I couldn't even move my leg. Like something was going wrong. And Debbie was noticing I was becoming very angry, which is not my personality, but just angry all the time, left leg. Long and the story is short, I actually went back to the UK after the little trip to South Africa for the wedding. And I went to a sports doctor to find out what is going on. And the sports doctor listened and saw, and he said, I think you've got nerve damage to one of your nerves in your leg. And I think we need to send you for tests to determine where this damage is. And Debbie was with me at the time. Now, she was pregnant with my son, Braden, at the time, 6 months pregnant, thereabout. We had a little daughter, Adriana, 1 year of age, thereabout. Little baby, 6 months. I call the bun in the oven at 6 months. And we were sitting in this room with the sports doctor. And I went to a sports doctor because it's very physical. I used to do a lot of gym and training, and I thought I'd done some damage. And he said, look, we're sending. Debbie said, can we just get a MRI scan on his brain? So I didn't even know why she said that. And she said, and he was like, no, I don't think we need to do this because if there was a brain sort of problem, he would lose mobility in both his legs. Don't worry about it. And she was quite forceful, if I can put it that way, or adamant. She said, can you get him a brain MRI scan? I really feel that you need to do this. And he said, all right, I'll do that. Long and the short of it is I went on the Monday. I saw him on a Saturday. On the Monday, I was having a brain MRI scan, or Monday or the Tuesday or the Wednesday, I can't remember exactly. And we had the brain MRI scan, and I was called back. Now, I was supposed to see a nerve specialist for my leg, but he was away for 2 weeks. So they then called me back and said, we need you to come and see us, which was again on another. It was during the week, but it was like, but hold on, there's still 2 weeks. So the guy said, listen, I need you to just come and see me, please. Can you come at your earliest convenience? So I was like, okay, fine. I remember Debbie was at Sky News. She was working. I went through to London to the offices. Didn't think anything about it at all. And I went into his offices. I sat down into his office and he was sitting facing the screen. He looked up at me and he started crying. And I was like, what is this guy doing? Like, what's wrong with him? And he said, I'm so sorry to do this to you. I just don't know how to tell you this. And he started crying. I was like, grow up. Come on, man up, boy, man up. What's wrong? and he turned his screen to me. And as he showed me that, I saw this big, like, weird shape, which I thought was my brain. But is like, so I said, well, why are you showing me that? He goes, that's your brain, and that's a brain tumor. And I remember just sitting there, looking at him like, come again? What are you saying? He goes, sorry, you have a brain tumor, and it's taken most of your right side of your brain. It's massive. And what we've done for you is we have gone through our medical team to look for the best neurosurgeon in London. And we found a Mr. Robert Bradford. And you've got an appointment to see him. And this is the day. And I was like, okay. So I walked out of the room with this information, walked out into the building, remember phoning Debbie. And as I phoned her, I just envisioned, will I ever see my son? Am I ever going to see my son? The son who's in my wife's stomach. Am I ever going to see him be born? And those emotions, and will I not be able to see my daughter grow up? Those emotions were overwhelming. And for about 30 seconds, 40 seconds, I cried. I phoned Debbie, told her what was going on. And I just remember thinking to myself, I'm going to make it. I'm going to make it. I'm going to read my Bible. I'm going to lean into the word. I'm just going to go for this. And I believe I will make this. So that's what I did. It's like almost going to war. And I put the war paint on. I got into this. But when I told Debbie, the poor young lady did say, look, because she's pregnant, are you sitting? That was chaos. I mean, the Sky News, they sent her home by taxi. They were very kind and nice to her. But the long and the short of it is I had to go for a brain op. And when I got told that, 2 weeks later, I was being cut open. Life or death situation. Now here I've just left work by a full-time paying job. Although I had some income coming, it's still a business on the side. It's a risk. So now if I'd known that, I probably would have stayed at Barclays, but I didn't. I left. But thank God I had this passive income coming in through property. And there was that moment of, if I hadn't done that, who knows what would have been the outcome. But I went and had the operation, which should have been about a 3-hour op, landed up being about 7.5 hours because of the size of the brain tumor. In fact, I was one of the very first people in the United Kingdom to be operated on using a robot. So actually going in there where the surgeon puts his hands, and it's precision cutting. And that's what happened because they had to do that because of I was told they didn't know, but the brain tumor was in my brain for maybe 10, 15 years. It had been growing and growing and growing. So with that, your blood vessels started growing in and around through the brain, the tumor. So, you make one wrong cut, I'm dead. Simple as that. But hey, I'm here today. I survived. It was pretty hardcore. I did almost die when I got into the special treatment after the operation. My blood drains when I sat up. I just remember like going and my heart stopped, and I had within seconds doctors, and I'll never forget that, doctors, nurses, everyone around me, like almost code red, and I was going. It was pretty traumatic in that experience. It was probably the only time I thought, whoa, what's going on here? And somehow I survived that, got out of it, and then, I had to learn to re-walk again because my left side was because your brain controls that side. So it was a whole thing of walking again. But what was told you'll take years, I was taking months because of, I just believe, in life, if you get given challenges, people can tell you one thing, but just go with your gut feel, go with what you believe, and don't be hampered by society or the rules, just if you feel you can do something, well, you do it. So the long and the short of it is I started walking again, started investing in property more and more. And in 2016, we started a business. And actually, I left London and we came to lovely Wales in 2014. And that's pretty much around the time when I met you. Fast forward to today, we've been buying properties more and more. So because I still look after my mom and dad to this day, and that's something that's happened my whole life since I was 14. So
they both live in Wales now, don't they?
yeah, well, actually, my mom's still in South Africa, but she's visiting as we speak right now. She's with me for 6 months, trying to see if we can get her into the UK. It's challenging at the moment, but my dad's here, he's sorted. So I've always had that responsibility, plus then the children. So I suppose the responsibility is there. You got to make things happen, right? So I've had to make things happen. You can either curl up in a ball in the corner and rock away through the fear of what can happen, or you can take it on and go for it. And I'm probably one of those characters where I take it on and go for it. So that's what I've been doing, buying lots of properties for myself, for investment purposes, for my children's future, for my future. And that's been my why and my driving force is my family, and also to be able to bless other people around me who needs it as and when it's required. But first of all, to look after myself and my family. And I've been buying properties. In fact, I'm actually at this point right now buying my last building. That's where I am at now, buying buildings. And I'm buying my last building with 7 flats in it. And that's, I would say, my career signed off from an investment perspective. I've got enough.
This is the last one.
This is probably going to be the last one. That's what I've told myself.
We'll probably said that 5 years ago, maybe.
Probably. But no, this one was too good to let go. And I've done it in a very creative way where I'm refinancing one building, buying another building, and probably out of my own money in the business, it's costing me about $3,500 because of the way I've structured it, done it through equity. And it's just as you grow into a business, like any business, you just start learning tricks of the trade. And that's where I am. So buying my final building, but through that, we started a business also in 2016, actually helping other people who working in full-time jobs, who either want to can stay in their full-time job, but maybe create another income for their pensions or eventually leave their job and buy, assets, income-producing assets. And for me, the best wealth creation asset building tool asset probably is property, because you get income from it, but over time you build wealth from it. And that's because of capital appreciation, i.e. you buy a property for 60 grand and in 10 years it's worth 100 grand. So that's wealth building. And through that, you also get cash flow. So it's great for income and for wealth building. So we started a company and I used my IT skills in that company to create where we've got due diligence tools where you can go out, put postcodes in and collect data, sold properties of similar type, similar size. You can get rental, you can get crime statistics, you can get all at the push of a button. And whereas if you would go in today's industry, you might have to go to 20 different sites. Well, mine does it all. So I use my IT passion, my property, and we combined and created this business. So now I suppose living the life of my dreams.
Brilliant. Well, fantastic. I think that's brought your business journey on a great conclusion. And you want to continue helping people, which is great, Per. And to see that, I've only seen a little glimpse of this business, and to see what it is today is amazing. And the fact that you as parents now can support your children who are on the verge to perhaps being superstar tennis professionals. Who knows? The fact that you can do those things and just do what you want, being as self-employed, is great. It's one of the advantages. But it's not to say, I think you've spoken about it, it's not been easy.
No.
You certainly had, a fantastic opportunity working in Barclays. And then all of a sudden you had this whole health issue, which it was, I imagine, quite scary, quite frightening, but to see you and your faith come out the other side, amazing. I hope that's inspired a lot of people today. So as we close, this podcast is all about business stories, and I would love to hear who is somebody that's maybe really inspired you, whether it's in the property industry, whether it's in creative finance. Who would you love to hear sat in front of you? Whose story would you love to hear and listen to?
It's a good question. So many people, I'll probably answer that too. But because I love technology, And I love to pick people's brains who are on another level. And this one person I'm thinking of, his brain is on such a different level to most people. I would love to see how he thinks and understand it better. And that would be Elon Musk. I would love to have an interview with that gentleman, sit down in front of him and just ask him, because he comes from actually South Africa. He comes from not far from when I was born in Pretoria. And he's got that culture ingrained in him. Of course, he now lives in America and he's an American citizen. But I would love to sit down and have an interview with him and pick his brains on his journey and how he thinks, because how he thinks is obviously different to how most people think. So he sees a picture, but a way bigger picture than how most people think. So what makes him different between me and him, or me and anyone looking at and listening to this podcast? What makes him different? What sets him apart? I'd love to pick his brains.
Well, maybe he'll be on the next episode of the podcast. Who knows?
Maybe I can put in a word and say, hey, Elon, will you come on to Stori Cymru's podcast?
Yeah, great. Awesome. Okay, if anyone wants to know anything about property, creative finance, how can they find out more if they want to get in this game, maybe, Peri?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, James. I mean, we've got a site, www.performanceproperties.co.uk. You can go and look up the website. You can also find us on Facebook. There is a closed Facebook group. Actually, it's full of information, full of deals, full of education in there. We try and mix and match to keep it an active group. So Performance Properties is on Facebook, closed group. Send a request. You can get it through us there. We are on Instagram. We do have a podcast, Performance Properties podcast. So you can reach out to us in many, many different ways. And if you've got any questions, our door is always open.
Great. But we'll share those details in the show notes for the podcast as well. So yeah, hopefully people can ask you questions if they want to learn more about property.
I appreciate it.
So thanks for coming on. Really appreciate this conversation. Thanks for giving your time. And I've learned lots about property. Great to hear your story, yours and Debbie's, or at least your sides. But yeah, it's been great to listen. And thanks for sharing that with this audience.
Yeah.
Peri.
And thank you very much for having me.